Hello, and welcome to We Got Planning News for You. I hope you can hear me this time, unlike our last episode. Charlie Banner here from KC Chambers, reporting from Belfast City Airport, where the single quiet room has been occupied by a 20-something who is watching a movie. So anyway, lovely to see you all. Can I first of all recommend to you our charities that we sponsor? It's a growing list, far too long for me to read out now, but you'll find it on our website, www.havewegotplanningnews4you.com, whatever that's abbreviated to. We are delighted this afternoon to welcome Shelly Rouse from the Planning Advisory Service. Shelley, hello and welcome to you. Can you tell us...
for having me. Hi.
We're delighted to have you on for a very topical interview, which is going to be led by Mary. But can I ask you the time-honoured questions first of all? Where are you calling us from? What have you chosen as our theme this evening? A little clue behind you. And what, if anything, are you drinking?
So they're all kind of interlinked, I suppose. So I'm calling you from sunny Faversham in North Kent. The theme of today is happy campers. That's my camper van behind me, where most weekends I'm out enjoying the sunshine around the Kent coast. And what am I drinking? Well, Faversham is the home of Shepherdine Brewery, so I'm drinking a Whitstable Bay blonde beer from their brewery.
Oh yeah, lovely.
Out of my special camping mug.
Fantastic. Whitstable's in place very close to my heart, having done a very long enforcement case for them over several years, the Oyster Company. Wonderful part of the world. Well, thank you very much. We've got lots of, Mary's certainly got lots of fascinating questions for you in the second half of the show. As I always say to our guests, that comes up in the first half of the show that takes your interest, you're very welcome to comment. Equally, no obligation at all. And without further ado, Mary, as always, good evening. You first.
Good evening, Charlie. Lovely to see you. Can you believe this is the beginning of series 13? I mean, I can't believe it. It's amazing. I think we've done amazing. I'm actually in Wandsworth in the basement, escaping the rain, and the theme reminds me of all my camping experiences, which have been pretty much all Cornwall-based. So I have got my reminder of Cornwall, which is a cushion with all the names of the bays that I go to, all of which have brilliant campsites. And I'm looking forward to our interview later, Shelley.
Bravo. Chris, you're still standing, I hope. Congratulations on your marathon run.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm still walking like John Wayne, if I'm honest. Getting down the stairs is a bit tricky. Still eating these. Have bags and bags of those. They're tasty. And yeah, thank you very much to everybody who sponsored me. £23,000. And that is nearly all from the development industry. Individuals in the main, some companies, just really fabulous. And that helped me get round. As you can see, I've still got the house. We've got the mansard roof there, and you can see that Presumption is wearing my medal. I am drinking, well, I'm not really drinking, I've got an evening of work ahead of me, but I've got a red wine here from lovely Anne Taylor. I went and did a breakfast talk at 7:30 in the morning in Nottingham, and wow, a room full of people, and Anne provided that afterwards to say thank you. And on your theme, I have a brother who lives in Western Australia on the beach in Perth. And that is my brother. And he has got a camper van, a VW camper van. And there he is just having, a quick snack. If we go to the next photo, that's his son taking my son surfing. Look at my brother's registration number, VW 1975. All the cool went into one brother. And then this is where he lives. Just have a look where my brother lives. Oh, which one of us got it right? That is where he lives and surfs on Yallingup Beach. So love the theme, love camping, love camper vans.
Fantastic, Chris. And well done again on the bat. 4 hours 24, wasn't it? Very, very good time indeed. We won't compare times. We won't compare. Very good, nonetheless. From one marathon runner to another. Sasha, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, Charlie. Thank you. And frankly, don't compare times, Charlie, because Chris runs with a ridiculous structure and you run free like me. Chris is unquestionably the most impressive of the three of us. We're waiting for Tucker to put his shoes on, but we'll wait till eternity for him to actually put in a performance. I'm in London. I'm very happy to see Shelly, and I think I just want to say to everyone who's watching, this is quite a momentous series because hopefully in the next month we are going to celebrate our 100th episode, and that is quite a remarkable achievement. So I think that's worth noting.
Absolutely, very exciting indeed. We just need to work on the date for that one. As currently scheduled, Paul's going to be at the dinner and I'm going to be on a plane. But we'll find a way. I'm talking about Paul. Where you look somewhere rather tropical, Paul.
My house in County Durham.
Oh, beautiful. That well-known tropical location.
Yes, you can see the palm trees just swaying in the wind behind, and the beach where I'll be going to later on. Actually, I will be going to the beach. So I'm going to get some tea in North Shields later on.
Is that double glazing part of the listing?
Yeah, we'll talk about that offline, Chris. I don't accept, Sash, that Charlie doesn't run with a ridiculous structure on his head. Have you seen it?
Oh.
Look, Shelley, as to your theory, as to your theme, rather, not theory. So the best that I could come up with at short notice was that I've been bought this, which is a bottle of Scarborough Fair Wold Top beer, simply because the last time that I went camping was when I was a venture scout in Scarborough in the early 13th century. So that's my last experience. My hometown is Scarborough.
Fantastic, Paul. I must say, on the subject of ridiculous structures on the top of my head, I'm not sure that it's the high point or the low point of my time in Parliament so far when Michael Fabricant came up to me and complimented my hair. I'll let others be the judge of that. Anyway, it's real, unlike his.
I was about to say you both share a blonde wig.
Oh, boom! It's not fake.
We are going to do some law at some stage. Yeah?
Yes,
we are. Move on. You're going to tell us the news, of which there's been quite a lot since our last time.
Yeah. So the last episode, I was in New York. So watching in after a pre-recorded episode. So since that was broadcast on the 21st of March, much has happened. You'll be unsurprised to hear. So I've broken it down into headings, and I'll run through them relatively quickly. Firstly, well, we are in pre-election mode because we've had announcements from both the Labour Party and from the Conservatives. It's quite clear that planning reform is going to be at the centre of the electoral battle that's just on the horizon. So, 21st of March, we had Rachel Reeves telling us that planning reform is going to be part of the Labour manifesto. The same day, the planning minister, Lee Rowley, announced £1 million for 10 councils to progress design codes because the majority of people apparently do not believe that the planning system will make their lives better. And then most recently, we've had the Labour Party, through the medium of both Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, telling us about something called the Grey Belt. That's the easy sites in the Green Belt. Lots of those that play a huge part in our practice, not. But anyway, we're going to get some guidance on that, which is what the RTPI suggested might be quite handy. On the last occasion, it was noted that this was imminent, but it actually happened. The Greater Manchester Strategic Framework was adopted on the 25th of March, which I suspect will be the peak of the duty to cooperate. I can't see it getting better than 9 authorities coming together to promote a scheme of that nature, but yet the following day and following, we've got yet more local authorities being recalcitrant about their local plans. So we've had Reading saying that they're going to delay their local plan review by 4 months. Cambridge City and South Cambs announcing a 4-month delay in the light of changes due to national policy. And then we've had the interim letter from the much-delayed Wirral local plan where the inspectors told Wirral, you need to find another 1,000 houses if possible and make your plan sound. That's actually viewed as a win, believe it or not. And we've also had Hertsmere saying that they're going to be promoting 40% less greenbelt release and 22% reduction in housing provision, followed by an almost identical statement by South Staffs in relation to their restarted local plan review. We've also got the Naughty Step update. So on the Naughty Step at the moment, we have Uttlesford, Chorley, Bristol and St Albans. But put on the Naughty Step for a brief period of time, so it must have only been a brief transgression, is Fareham. Conservative control, and there's been much speculation as to why that happened. The pressure of the naughty step may very well be one thing that we'll be talking about later this year, and the pressure it placed on pins. Police update. The police update is unbelievably, we have yet more instances where councillors are being threatened by members of the public who don't like planning decisions, which is the antithesis of local democracy. The most recently was one in Arran district. It's contemptible. And one might just think, if the converse had been the case, that if the decision had been swayed by threats from third parties, that's not democracy. We've had BNG for small sites coming in. We've had lots of parts of the LAURA, the Levelling Up Act, brought into force. We've now got Section 73B, which allows us to overturn FINI and amend descriptions of development. But, and this is mentally underlined for everybody on the webcast, Section 73B is not a power to amend because it creates another freestanding consent, and it's the same problem as Section 73. And then PIN's performance is improving. In fact, PIN's performance is improving notably. Their most recent report was 1,500 decisions taken in January of this year. The number of open cases have dropped for the 8th month on record. That means that they're deciding more cases than are coming in. The median time for decisions by inquiry has dropped from 53 to 40 weeks, and 93% of appeals being decided by written reps. Their median time for determination has dropped to an amazing 30 weeks, when we were talking well over a year during the pandemic. We're not quite hitting DLUC targets, but certainly a significantly improving performance. So big it up, as I'm told is the correct street language, to PINS and Rich Schofield. And finally, can I commend this document to everybody on the call? There is a document called Beyond Barker, which is a damning report published by the HBF on the failure of the housing market to deliver English national needs. Published earlier on this month, it's essentially a review of the Barker review that Kate Barker was asked to do under Gordon Brown. And she makes, or rather the review, and the panel on the review makes 4 obvious points at page 23 of the report. A reversion to clear housing targets, please. Properly resourced planning departments, please. Adopt a consistent approach to infrastructure contributions for 106 and have national consistency requirements. For example, put them in the PPG. And then a greater influence by the industry over the use of construction industry training levy so that they can actually direct it to people who can build houses. It is common sense. It may not be inspired by Thomas Paine, but I'm happy to quote it. It's well worth a read. And that, Charlie, is the news.
Can I just say, Paul, I mean, that was fabulous, but there's smoke drifting across behind you. So either you've got a barbecue on or something's on fire.
No, don't worry. The boilers are just down there in the basement, Chris.
Okay.
It's dangerous.
It's my staff shoveling the coal into it in their sustainable fashion.
You're in the right place for that.
No, it's the air source heat pump comes next year. That's on my list of things to add to my listed building, but apparently they're not very keen on them.
Now, Paul, thanks so much indeed for that. Well, I'm next up, and I'm going to cover the first of 2 solar-related cases that we were going to be covering this week. And I'm going to deal with a case called Low Carbon Solar Park 6 Limited, and the Secretary of State for the Department of Levelling Up and Housing and Communities. That snappy title. And this is a statutory review of an inspector's refusal of an application for a solar park, which was made directly to the Planning Inspectorate under Section 62A of the Town and Country Planning Act. And the reason it was made directly to PINS was because it was in Uttlesford, one of those councils that is in the naughty step. And the application was refused. And now Microsoft Word is not responding, so I'm not going to add my script. But thankfully, I can memorise what it's about because I've read and studied this case quite well. So the application was dismissed. And the reason it was dismissed was on heritage grounds, on the basis of an objection from Essex County Council, the local archaeological authority, and Historic England, on the basis that there hadn't been trial trenching. The application had put forward a desk-based assessment of archaeological remains, but there hadn't been trial trenching. What the claimant in the judicial review, the applicant in the proceedings, said to the High Court was that the inspector had acted unlawfully in failing to admit written representations that it had put in response to Historic England to the effect that trial trenches were unnecessary because irrespective of what was under the ground, appropriate mitigation could avoid any effect on the archaeological beneath it. Now, the written reps, the rebuttal statement, was put in after the deadline for representations to be made for pins, and there was no provision in the relevant procedural rules for the rebuttal statement to be accepted at the stage when it was submitted. However, it was common ground before the court that the inspector had a discretion whether or not to accept it, and that this discretion had to be exercised in accordance with principles of procedural fairness. And just pausing there, that's one important aspect of the decision, that even where the PIN's rules or the PIN's guidance and the inquiry's procedure rules or the relevant procedure rules don't provide for a document to be accepted, if procedural fairness requires it to be accepted, then the inspector should exercise their discretion accordingly. So the real question in the judicial review or statutory review was, did procedural fairness mean that the applicant's rebuttal statement in Historic England had to be admitted? And His Honour Judge Milwyn Jarwin, sitting as a High Court judge, held that it didn't and dismissed the claim. He emphasised that the PIN's guidance on Section 262A applications stressed the importance of applicants engaging statutory consultees before making an application. So you're meant to flush out the case against you before you make an application, given that the Section 62A process is intended to be a streamlined, fast-track procedure. And the applicant in this case hadn't engaged with Historic England until the application process was well underway. And even when it did do so, its turnaround times for correspondence was considerably slower than HE. The judge also went on to note that the framework requires the significance of heritage assets to be identified and that the onus on this respect was on an applicant. So he therefore held that the applicant knew the test it had to be met. He said that there needs to be understanding of significance in order to assess whether any mitigation appropriately addresses any harm. In other words, the applicant ought to have known the gist of the case against it. Now, that aspect of judgment, in my view, is arguably questionable because actually paragraph 194 of the framework does not require trial trenching in every case where the archaeology may be affected. The requirement is for, and I'm quoting the framework here, having now got my notes back up, an appropriate desk-based assessment and, where necessary, a field evaluation. So you need a field evaluation where it's necessary. And how's an appellant to second-guess the basis on which it's said by others that a field evaluation is necessary? So I would question whether that part of the judgment, which held that the fact that you have to identify significance mean the appellant should have preempted the case against it for a trial trenching. I question whether that part of the judgment is sound. However, on the facts of the case, this is unlikely to make a difference because the judge went on to note that over a month before the deadline for representations had expired, the County Council had explained why, in their view, field trenches were required. And they'd done that well before the deadline for reps had expired. So even by that stage, although Historic England hadn't yet weighed in, the applicant knew in good time, well before the deadline for reps, that it had a case to meet in relation to trial trenching, which it didn't do through submitting in time reps. It waited for Historic England and then sought to put in an out-of-time rebuttal. And therefore, in the circumstances, fairness didn't require an out-of-time representation to be admitted following Historic England's objection. They could and should have put their rebuttal in relation to trial trenching in time rather than waiting till out of time. So it's a harsh decision, but one which on the particular facts was justified in law. The key take-home, apart from what I just mentioned about procedural fairness trumping the inquiry's procedure rules, the key take-home is the courts will be sceptical about assertions of prejudice and unfairness to parties in proceedings for PINs, arising from what's said to be the denial of an opportunity to respond to points made by the other side, when the gist of those points had already been foreshadowed and could fairly have been dealt with in advance. So you've got to show real prejudice rather than simply say, wait, we should have had a right to respond. And there was no real prejudice here. So yeah, that's the High Court decision in Low Carbon Solar Park. And now, Chris, you're going to take us to a place called Dorney, are you not?
I am indeed. And if we just bring that up, that'll be a appeal decision determined by the Secretary of State in Slough. And as you can see, it was a decision of Hayley Butcher, and she was concerned with a proposal described as an ultra-advanced, multi-dimensional, highly sustainable, renewable energy park with high-capacity battery storage, and a 460-bedroom hotel. Unusual combination, isn't it? And particularly because the hotel was by a biogas waste digester and vertical forest for building. Now, I read this and I thought, blimey, that's quite a description. I mean, not even Paul would put it in such florid terms, really. And the truth is that this is an example of a planning application done, I think, without the benefit of extensive expert advice and consultants, because throughout you find it described in this kind of very glowing terms, and it's very difficult to pin down what the proposal actually was. I went into the inspector's decision to try and understand this. It's an outline scheme. It seeks, amongst other things, 19,400 square metres of floor space. Various floor plans and elevations of the hotel and the office buildings were provided, but the inspector said, well, they don't say they're illustrative on them, but they plainly were illustrative. So you're going to treat it as an outline scheme, and even access was in outline. And then the specific proposals were, this is the applicant's description, the appellant's description, combined wind, solar, photovoltaic and thermal hybrid energy harvesting, a large Telstra power pack energy store to store all the PV and wind energy generated with perhaps an excess supplied to the grid, a Telstra-type supercharger station to provide recharging for EV supplied by energy generated on-site, the hotel with helicopter landing on the roof, infrastructure support and specialist recharging, lifts to have energy regeneration to go all the way through the movement, biogas digester generation plant, 2 office blocks, green living balconies, coated in CO2 sequestration and air pollutant capture enzyme orientation, exploration for efficient pollution eradication. Extraordinary. And I think the point is that this was somebody's ambition rather than a realistic proposal. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And actually, it's a multifaceted proposal, but it was proposed in the Greenbelt. If we go to paragraph 5, we see that's not the end of the ambition, because what we have is the Secretary of State notes that, as explained in the inspector's report, the proposed overhead gondola service crossing the M4 and use of I shouldn't laugh, should I? But and use of electrical vertical takeoff and landing aircraft elements have now been removed from the proposal because Roadways England National Highways now had objected. So I mean, a very ambitious proposal, a lack of evidence, I think, really to support it. It was undoubtedly, the inspector found, impacting on the openness of the Greenbelt. The Secretary of State agreed. It would harm listed buildings and conservation areas. There wasn't even a conservation area or heritage statement affecting listed buildings as well. The inspector had to ask for that, and the local authority commented on that. And then the inspector found there would be harm to heritage assets. She said it would appear entirely out of character with the surroundings. It wouldn't adequately address the framework or the PPG. Most of the site was in flood zones 2 and 3. Gave limited weight to the benefits of job creation, and interestingly found that it failed the heritage harm test. That's at paragraph 36 of the decision letter. The inspector and the Secretary of State. It's quite easy, usually, the benefits of a scheme to overcome heritage harm. But here is an example where the inspector and the Secretary of State were very clear that the heritage harm, remember there hadn't even been a heritage statement with the application, was sufficient to outweigh all the benefits of the scheme, much of which I think the inspector felt were talked up, and it was really just the employment benefits. So the appeal was dismissed. The Secretary of State dismissed it on the recommendation of the inspector. And I think it is a textbook lesson that do not go into a proposal like this without a full remit of expert advice. It was dealt with by written reps, so I can't identify exactly who was representing who, but it's an unusual case, to say the least.
Thanks very much, Chris. Well, if the plane I'm shortly about to catch is an electric vertical takeoff plane, I should not be particularly happy. Now, moving on from that to St Albans, and Sasha, you're going to tell us about the combined Secretary of State decisions in Chiswell Green.
I am, Charlie. Now, can I just say I'm going to start my comments by saying, as we all know, status and nature of the Greenbelt is unbelievably contentious at the moment, because we have the Conservative political view that the Greenbelt is not an appropriate for development. We have the Labour Party clearly committing to the Grey Belt, or we will see their proposals probably in December when they win the general election, according to the various polls. But Charlie, you had the courage, along with Paul Stinchcombe, to take 2 appeals at St Albans. Now, as some of our listeners know, St Albans is quite unique. I mean, Paul and I and Mary are of relative vintage, and I commenced practice in April 93. St Albans adopted their last local plan in 94, and you had the prescience for the first time in your career to take an appeal through the process, because what we have in St Albans is a disastrous housing land supply position, and you took appeals with Paul Stinchcombe. You took an appeal of approximately 300 units, and Paul Stinchcombe did the same, and the Secretary of State effectively used his powers under Section 77 to effectively determine these matters. And I think it's appropriate that these are 2 very important Greenbelt decisions, because the Secretary of State firmly takes the view that very special circumstances are found. And overall, in the light of where the development plan stands, the clear view was taken that there are very special circumstances, and very special circumstances were found both in relation to Appeal A and Appeal B. And I think, I mean, frankly, it's a commendable decision in the light of where the HLS stands, but it also shows that, frankly, I mean, you, myself, Paul, Mary and Chris are always asked by many clients about whether there be very special circumstances, and the simple point is it's incredibly subjective in the light of the Secretary of State's decision. But these decisions do indicate that the Secretary of State is going to take a more proactive and frankly, positive approach to the approach to Greenbelt, by finding that HLS, the housing land supply and the affordable housing need, is of such magnitude and importance that it does frankly justify the grant of consent. So in both appeals, which were in late March, the Secretary of State concluded that very special circumstances was met, it outweighed the harm, and therefore permission was granted. And you and your fellow appellants are both to be commended for taking these to appeal, in the sense that it proves the point that where the need is overwhelming, that frankly planning permission should be granted. So in the overall balance of the 22nd of March 2024, planning permission was granted. And I don't know, Charlie, you might be able to update us whether St Albans has taken these matters to the High Court under Section 78 under Section 288 or not. Do you have any information on that?
I've heard nothing. I can't now remember whether we're still within the 6-week period.
You are,
obviously.
We're 22nd of March, but on the basis you haven't had anything, the presumption must be that the local authority is not challenging them.
That must be right. An interesting quirk to this case was that the Appeal B, Chiswell Green North, was the landowner and promoter was a former heavyweight champion boxer. I think his name was Steve Conning, the Celtic warrior. And he did actually give evidence, and unsurprisingly, none of the barristers wanted to cross-examine him. So whether that had anything to do with it, you never know. Anyway, without further ado, over to you, Mary, to introduce and interview our guest.
Thank you very much indeed, Charlie. So, Shelley, it's our turn now. And I want to start, please, if I may, by introducing you. So you've been working full-time for the Planning Advisory Service as a principal consultant since 2021. But I just want to highlight your career journey, as it were, because you've been working in local government for over 20 years. You began by studying interior architecture at what was then the Kent Institute of Architecture and Design. And following that, you began your career with Medway Council in an economic role funded by CEDA. I mean, I remember CEDA. I remember doing employment appeals supported by CEDA back in the days of regional planning. You then spent 12 years at Swale Borough Council, during which you gained a master's in planning, and I salute anybody who is working full-time and also studying. So you went from being a development control officer to assisting in housing land supply issues, writing a development plan document on gypsies and travellers for the local plans team, and seeing through 2 examinations. So a really varied career there before you moved on to really focus on major site delivery. Then you went to Canterbury, where you were a principal planner. And again, you were delivery focused, as I understand, at Canterbury. And it was at Canterbury that you discovered PASS, and you were originally seconded to the Planning Advisory Service. And they lent you out to DLUC. So that's an interesting idea. You get seconded to one organisation that then lends you out to DLUC, and you were working for them during the pandemic, which must have been pretty interesting, on housing, land supply and delivery test matters. And as I said, you've been with them full-time since 2021. So, bearing in mind your background, I'd like to ask you first, what advice would you give someone at the outset of their career about the merits of the public versus the private sector from your vantage point?
That's a great question, Mary. And I make no bones about it. I'm a massive advocate for local authority work and kind of public sector. I think if I was a stick of rock, snap me in half, I'd probably say public sector kind of through the middle. So, it's no surprise I'd be a massive advocate for anyone kind of starting their career. Well, not just starting your career. I think everyone should at some point in their career work for a local authority and get into that side of things, because it's where you find out how the cogs of local government and the cogs of the planning system kind of work on that side of things. There are only certain things of the planning system you can do in a local planning authority. You can only make a local plan working at council. You can only be the kind of autonomous decision maker within a local authority. And if, like me, you're interested in politics, you want to see kind of local democracy in all its glory, warts and all, then being part of a council and kind of seeing how that works in terms of members, decision making, kind of governance structures, it's really interesting. And I think whenever I talk to planners, whether they're private sector or public sector, I always ask, why did you get into planning? And pretty much the answer across the board is to do good for communities, to bring forward development, to kind of, make stuff happen that make the world a better place. And the kind of satisfaction and kind of pride of work you get working in a local authority. You pull together all those strands of evidence, you pull together all those kind of different competing views. It's a real sense of kind of pride and satisfaction of pulling that all together and balancing it in the public good. And you can really only do that from inside a local authority. So I would always say, give it a go. I'm not going to sugarcoat it though. Like, there are challenges in local government at the moment. We're all kind of aware of those. But I think some of those challenges are really kind of driving innovation and creativity at the moment. And that's always been my experience, that innovation and trying things in a new way, again, kind of always comes from local government. All that said, I wish there was a little bit more kind of understanding from both sides of the table. So I'm a regional chair of Women in Planning. And that, for me, like, network organisations that bring together public and private to kind of have that dialogue of shared issues, whether it's, in the workplace or outside of the workplace. Yeah, I would love to see more kind of cross-collaborative working across the sector.
Thank you. My next question is about the planning graduate scheme, Pathways to Planning. How can we help? Tell us about that, and how can we and our audience help in that? Because that's all about trying to get more graduates into planning.
Well, it is, and I'm conscious we only have like half an hour to talk, so I could talk with enthusiasm about pathways. I think probably till the cows come home. It's so exciting. There's never been anything like it before. It's just brilliant. I will try and kind of condense that down into the
How many?
So the scheme is kind of the brainchild of DLUC. They're the funders for it, and they came to the local government association because they've got a track record in running the National Graduate Development Management Programme, which gets around 200 graduates into local authority positions every year. And that shows really successful retention rates. So around 77% of those graduates stay in public sector, stay working at councils throughout their entire career. And
that's across the piece, though, all disciplines.
That's across all disciplines, so working in all sectors of the council. So the idea is to kind of replicate that graduate scheme, but just for planning departments. So it's been delivered at pace, only started last June, and hopefully by September there will be 120 new planners within local authority council planning teams. And essentially the scheme kind of matchmakes graduates from a wide variety of backgrounds, so any degree background. We've really kind of marketed the scheme at universities where equality and diversity and social mobility are real contributing factors. And then we kind of matchmake them then with councils that want to take part. Those graduates kind of on board with council, they stay with them for 3 years, they get exposure to all the variety in local authority work. But it's been really successful. So embedding kind of EDI principles at the start has resulted in around 40% of the graduates who are applying coming from a BAME background, and around 25% coming with social mobility indicators. So it's, that's the core of it. We want to get people not from geography degrees, not from planning degrees, but a wide spectrum of backgrounds to fall in love with planning.
Yeah, that sounds really excellent. And in a way, we need that double and then treble, and need it to grow, don't we?
I think that's how the audience can help. So if you're in the audience and you work for a council, why haven't you signed up yet? Do it today. And if you're not from a council, just sharing it far and wide. So going onto LinkedIn, going onto Instagram, the Pathways to Planning kind of accounts. The more we get the message out, the more excellent graduates will kind of hit the apply button.
Indeed. Okay, my next question is about the Planning Advisory Service. What is its purpose and function, and where does it get its funding from?
So we have a really kind of unique position, I think, as an organisation. So we're part of the Local Government Association. So we're kind of an arm of it in the same way that kind of other bodies such as OPE and other things are. So we're part of the local government family, but we receive our funding from DLUC, but then ultimately our kind of customers, and the whole reason we exist is to support and develop councils. So we kind of have three people that we're responsible or responding to.
So you're looking in various directions. You're like a user. You're looking towards DLUC. You're looking towards the local government association, and then you're looking outward to help English councils.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we also play a role in gathering kind of feedback, views, or being the voice of local government back to DLUC as well. So that's a kind of key role we play in just reflecting what's happening out there in the sector. But back into that. I mean, I always kind of say we're a little bit like Robin Hood. We take the money from DLUC and then we spend it on doing good supportive work and kind of driving improvement within local planning authorities.
Well, now I've got this picture of you as Maid Marian. So, I mean, is your relationship with DLUC an arm's length one?
Yeah, I suppose a little bit in the same way that, I
think it is.
Yeah, and we're a non-political, non-lobbying organisation. So the local government association do have that kind of lobbyist role, but kind of our role is very much non-political, non-lobbying. So we don't respond to consultations. I know we're going to talk about the accelerated planning service consultation coming up, and we don't kind of petition for change or for kind of amendments to the planning service. Our role is to, I suppose, kind of give information and support council. So we're a little bit like the fourth emergency service for planning teams or the AA. So, councils can kind of ring the bat phone when things have gone wrong and kind of ask for immediate assistance. We can kind of go and do MOTs on their planning service or, that kind of thing. We can, show them all the latest upgrades, like what are the new wheels in the showroom. So talk to them about kind of new policy developments or new things coming through, or essentially just show off best practice. A lot of what we do is not working with councils who are on the naughty list, although that is part of our kind of remit. It's really about kind of showcasing best practice and really enabling that peer-to-peer discussion to kind of drive improvement across the board.
Do you get involved in training councils at all? Yeah.
Lots and lots of training, lots and lots of making stuff, holding webinars, holding kind of information giving sessions. Lots and lots of tools and guidance gets created that we make available for councils, and not just officers. So the bat phone's been ringing quite a lot with councils wanting to kind of line up councillor training for the other side of the local elections.
Yeah, indeed. Right, so let's come on, because as you rightly anticipate, we want to talk about the accelerated planning system consultation. And so my first question really is, who should respond, by when, and what's your role, broadly speaking, in the consultation process?
So the consultation finishes on the 1st of May. So that's the when. I think the who, I hope anyone who's got an interest in the planning system, particularly because a lot of the proposals that are in there kind of affect not just local planning authorities, but they're talking about doing things faster, quicker, and changing or amending some of the kind of tools that we have for that kind of collaborative dialogue. So extensions of time, a kind of move towards more kind of pre-app work. So I would hope that anyone that submits planning application, deals with planning applications, or, any interest in the planning system is probably going to put a consultation response in.
Indeed. Okay, there are 4 key elements to the consultation. So let's just walk through them. So let's start with the accelerated 10-week application process. What is driving this, do you think? And if it doesn't embarrass you, what do local planning authorities, in your view, need to do to try and achieve this, assuming that it comes to pass?
Yeah, I mean, the proposal is that there would be this kind of accelerated process, and the proposal kind of couches that very much around commercial development. So it would apply to commercial applications, but with a bit of a caveat. So provided those commercial applications don't have an environmental impact assessment implications, anything to do with kind of HABs regs, or anything like that, and I've spoken to a few councils who've said, actually, that's probably not going to be very many commercial applications we have. It might be quite limited, but there's scope within the consultation to kind of say, look, maybe further down the line, this would be extended and expanded to include other types of development, including residential. And I think that's the bit where people have questions, have views, because the kind of dashboard of PS1 and PS2 data returns has been launched and made available, and that kind of shows that actually only 20% of major applications are getting determined within a 13-week period without an extension of time or without what they call a planning agreement. So that, I learned that this week, that planning agreement doesn't differentiate between where a PPA has been in place or an EOT. So maybe the kind of heavy use of EOTs isn't as endemic as we think, but it raises some really big questions around performance at the moment in terms of meeting the kind of 13 and 8 week deadlines.
And consultation responses. How would council be expected to make a determination if they don't have prompt consultation responses, not only from their own internal officers, but also if they're districts with county councils from the county council and the, statutory consultees, Natural England, the Environment Agency, etc.
Yeah, and I think we're all waiting with bated breath for the review on StatCons that we know is coming.
Yeah, indeed.
But definitely, what do local authorities kind of need to achieve a faster process? Well, I would say some resources. So I talked earlier about the kind of challenges that are out there. Most planning departments have seen a 40 to 60% reduction in kind of core funding. Local planning authorities have seen a 25% reduction in planning officers. So you're a quarter of the staff down with probably about half the budget that you used to have 10 years ago. A lot of planning departments are kind of trying to operate with one hand tied around their back. 80% of councils have got vacancies around that senior planner role, and they're the hardest position to recruit. I think planners and social workers are the hardest posts to fill within local government. So there's just not enough bums on seats and not enough money to kind of do the job to meet whatever, I think, timeline that we would want to put on applications.
Shelley, that has been a constant theme around in the background for all of our now 13 series. To be honest, it's really quite depressing. But let's move on to the second key element, because that is, of course, about changing how and when extensions of time can be used. And I wonder if you could give us some insight into what do you think has prompted government to investigate this? And really, I wonder what is wrong with parties agreeing extensions of time in order to achieve a pragmatic result.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't like to say or to second guess why government have kind of prompted this, but I do think, when extensions of time kind of first came in, they were very much seen as you use them when there's complexity, you use them when there's a kind of larger scale scheme. And it's, like you said, it's around that collaborative working of let's be sensible, let's agree a kind of framework of dates. We'll both kind of sign up to, we're going to hit these particular milestones. And it was good working practice. I think potentially what's happened is they've been overused. And I think the consultation says that EOTs aren't going to disappear, but they shouldn't really be used for kind of household or minor development and should be used in more limited circumstances for major development. So it's not being proposed that they'll be scrapped entirely. No. But I do think, the use of on kind of householder stuff, that's probably masking some issues within local government, and they're being used to, I suppose, kind of help with some of these resourcing issues to be a bit of a sticking plaster.
But it's interesting that from what you've said, the information that is at your disposal is not actually distinguishing between applications where there's been one extension of time or applications when there's been more than one extension of time, nor is there any information to indicate whether in those cases, for example, statutory consultees have not delivered on their consultation responses.
Yeah, so my job is to essentially help authorities understand the consultation and sort of so they can write better responses to DLUC. And yeah, I think there is definitely a view that having an extension of time that then has a further extension of time, could be a really pragmatic response. Yeah,
indeed. Okay. The next, the third element is the simplified appeal process. And that sort of has echoes slightly. It reminds me a little bit of the case Charlie was talking about, because what's being suggested here is an appeal process where you are allowed only to rely on material that you submit in the first place to the councils as part of your application.
Yeah, and I can see that that's potentially a kind of double-edged sword, because sometimes it's really useful to provide updated information or, things have happened. But I think this is definitely being driven, a little bit by the Planning Inspectorate. So as part of their kind of information about the consultation, I think it's between 15 and 20% of the applications they receive are, this has been refused because not enough information was submitted with the application. So it might have been missing a heritage statement, might have been missing a BAT survey. And then by the time the appeal comes around, the appellant kind of puts that information in. And the council's like, well, if you'd shown me that, I probably would have approved it and we wouldn't be in this appeal scenario. So I think it's designed to kind of fix some of that problem. But I can see that actually having someone to kind of do a quicker process for an appeal, might help everyone concerned in the planning system.
Might help some people in certain cases, but again, okay. And then the final one is the proposed new section 73B for amendments and drop-ins. And can you just explain that to us, please?
Well, I will try, but you have to remember, you're all... Well, no, that's embarrassing. I'm not. So, essentially, Section 73B is going to be this new way, in the same way of Section 73. It's going to be a kind of separate, connected permission that allows amendments to the description of the development to occur and for other variations of conditions to happen. I won't make any view as to whether that will fix the hillside conundrum.
No, I'm not asking you that.
All to debate. But, the pragmatist in me is now having the ability to amend the description of the development seems quite good common sense. I think we've all kind of collectively seen a vaguening of descriptions of development where people are, I suppose, anticipating that the real world's going to happen, things are going to change.
Yes.
From outline consent to spades in the ground can quite often be quite a significant length of time, viability considerations, pipeline issues. And so actually having the ability to tweak the original description in a sensible way just seems like common sense. And I know the planning system is not always or often common sense. This feels like a good one.
Excellent. And how have you been helping councils to secure the planning skills delivery funds that have been available?
Yeah, so I think it's linked to the consultation, really. I mean, the accelerated planning system is, in essence, saying, let's do things quicker. And I've got lots of local authorities saying, but with what? You want me to do something faster, but with less. And a lot of the work that Paz has been doing has been helping local authorities with their kind of backlog of planning application issues. So the Planning Skills Delivery Fund this year has handed out £14 million to 111 local authorities, and we've been kind of supporting them in terms of what the projects they're doing in terms of how are they clearing their backlog. I mean, how do you define the backlog? That's different for every council, but we've been kind of supporting them navigate how to submit their bids, which kind of projects they would like to put forward to and initiatives to kind of clear the backlog, how they've kind of navigated the allocation of funds. That's been quite a complicated kind of governance process. But we've done a lot of kind of highlighting of best practice, so building a kind of officer network, sharing what councils are up to in terms of busting their backlog of applications. And I think we'll be continuing that in the coming months. So hopefully holding some kind of webinars or open events where everyone in the industry can hear about how councils are doing good work to clear application backlogs. That's obviously when you then think about the fact that the consultation raises issues around performance measures and how you perform, that's what makes me a little bit, I raise an eyebrow, because I'm like, well, yes, there are backlogs of applications, let's clear them, but you've got to be sure that you're not kind of overstepping the performance measures that are in place.
Given the resources, yeah. Well, we salute your efforts, because it's in everybody's interest that you help councils help themselves in terms of trying to remove their backlogs. Now, I've hogged you far too much. I need to open this out. Paul, can I start with you, please? What's your question for Shelly?
Just unmuting. Sorry about that. Hello, Shelly. I've witted on about resources, so I'm going to pick up with that theme and whether or not PPAs are the panacea to the resource problem. Brackets, no, it isn't. It should be a hypothecation of planning fees and charging for appeals. But I'd welcome your thoughts rather than my own personal prejudices.
He does that a lot. It's called a leading question.
Yeah, I mean, so as we've done a kind of massive project in 2023 on pre-apps and PPAs, where we did, I think, a benchmarking of different fee schedules. We put together lots of guidance, kind of worked out kind of officer hours. We've made a kind of PPA template to be used nationally. Next week I'm going to an undisclosed region of the UK where 8 authorities want to have a standardised fee schedule and offer of pre-application services, consistency around charging, all really excellent stuff. I'm a big fan of pre-apps and PPAs, because I think, particularly PPAs, they really help with project and time management. And I think that is one of the kind of key skills. It's one of the key soft skills that we might not have consistently kind of across local authorities at the moment. Now, as I was saying, that kind of senior planner level, that's where the kind of brain drain out authority tends to be. That's the hardest place. And sometimes that's the level where really good time management, really good project management, and really good skills of dealing with complexity of application are all within that kind of level of role. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of pre-apps and PPAs. And I know we've kind of talked earlier in the week around the maybe the tough love approach that some local authorities are kind of bringing in around limiting in-app negotiation, or kind of saying, actually, all the hard work gets shifted into the pre-app, because that's the kind of space for those discussions, and then what gets submitted is what gets determined. I've got mixed feelings about that, but I think, again, it's a symptom of the kind of chronic resource and skill shortage that's happening in local authorities, to the point where they've got to focus on the must-dos rather than the should-dos, in terms of having that more collaborative, more kind of applicant-flexed approach. That being said, though, there are plenty of authorities that are doing really good collaborative work and, really kind of helpful and sort of understanding the delivery and enabling function that they do. But I think it's just a symptom of the chronic illness that's out there at the moment.
Thank you, Shelley. That cheered me up no end.
Sasha, your question, please.
Thank you, Mary. Shelley, one of the things that strikes me very strongly is that there's a significant level of breakdown between appellants, applicants, and the local authority in the current system. What do you think would be material steps that could be taken to improve the relationship between the divide that exists between applicants and an LPA who have an application to determine?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big advocate for stability within planning teams. I heard today for a particular planning team where it's a really complex application. If it's not kind of fixed, it's probably heading for appeal. And they're on their 5th agency case officer for that particular complex site. And I'm sure that's not uncommon. I'm sure you've probably all had, quite your own horror stories around that. So I think some stability within kind of planning teams, I see has a real kind of benefit for that enabling of more collaborative working. And I would love to wave a magic wand and have all council departments kind of fully resourced and fully funded. Yeah. But going back to kind of early career space that I was talking about earlier, I do think having a graduate system or having early career networks, I think really helps. I think there hasn't been that kind of headspace of understanding the other side of the table, going to doing some training events around developer finance, how site options get put together. I mean, that was invaluable for me when I started my career, understanding all the drivers and motivations from both sides of the table. So yeah, I would love to see some sort of secondment network or something happening within that early career space to make that happen.
Yeah, maybe the private sector needs to help the public sector a little bit more in that space, as it were. I know we're literally at 6:30, and we normally finish at 6:30. Charlie, we just got time for a quick question from you.
No, quick one. I was going to ask, if you're Robin Hood, does that mean that Chris is Little John? But instead of asking that, I'll ask about the Super Squad. What are your thoughts about Deluxe forthcoming planning Super Squad? And what, if any, interplay might there be between it and the PAS?
Yeah, so great question. So Deluxe, in the autumn statement announced there's a planning Super Squad that's going to be put together and parachuted into Cambridge first to kind of help deliver. I mean, I think, we don't know a lot of detail at the moment. I'm sure many of the people on the call, like me, had a proper snoop of the job description when the jobs went out for advert last month. It was some very interesting parts of what the job will entail. But yeah, so job adverts only just out. I don't think the Avengers have assembled yet. We'll see how it gets put together, what their kind of remit is. And I'm sure that as kind of funder and liaison, we'll jump into action and help and support them in any way that they need.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Shelley.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Chris, you
just ever so quickly, because we are short of time.
Yeah.
To say how intelligently you speak on associates. Shelley, we've done 50 Shades before, but you speak very intelligently and very positively for local authorities. I've got a slightly different view about democracy working effectively. I'm not sure we're hearing from the people who want the houses and want the development. So championing democracy, yes. But is it really democracy what we're getting, particularly in areas which are affluent and so on? My question, though, imagine a new incoming government like Sasha mentioned towards the end of the year, which now looks 99% certain. Charlie's just gone. And how many officers, realistically, if we could do it, do you think we need to get back to the level at which we can deliver lots of development, lots of economic growth? Labour have talked about, 300. That's less than one per authority. Just give me a ballpark figure. 10,000?
Oh, gosh. I don't know that I can, because each planning authority and each planning authority department are uniquely different. I thought when I joined PAS, actually all councils are the same. Oh my gosh, was I in for a shock? There are 309 planning authorities at the moment, and they're all of different sizes, different complexities, have different issues. So I always get asked, what's the magic number of officers I need to deliver my planning service? And there isn't really a kind of magic response. So 300 probably isn't enough. I definitely want to see Pathways to Planning become a kind of permanent fixture. It's got funding for this year and for next year, and that's aiming to get 120 or up to 120 graduates starting in council planning teams. Be great if that could be 120 every year from here on in for the next kind of 20 years that I'm in local government. I think that's more than 300, less than 10,000.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you, Shelley. I think thank you very much for your answers. It's been a really stimulating interview, but I think it's time now to hand back to Charlie.
Thank you very much, Mary. It also remains for me to say thank you for conducting the interview. Thank you, Shelley, for your fascinating insight. Keep up the really great work, your colleagues. And We will be back on the 9th of May. It's just 5:30 as usual. So watch this space. And until then, have a lovely evening. I'm going to go and catch my hopefully non-electric, non-vertical takeoff flight back home from Belfast, and see you all soon. Have a nice weekend ahead. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Shelley.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you so much.